This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Chris Goffard here at LA Times Studios. Thanks for joining us on Crimes of the Times. Today we discuss the tragic death of 3 actors on the set of Twilight Zone, the movie, and the prosecution that followed. We talked to the homicide detective who built the case against the A-list filmmaker he believed had behaved recklessly. Tell us what you think in the comments below.
I was assigned by myself to go out to Indian Dunes that night. And I questioned what was going on with the circumstances of how the deaths occurred. And they said it was involved the movie filming, and there were pyrotechnics and helicopter involved.
This is Thomas Buds, a former sergeant with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He's describing the night in summer 1982 when he was summoned to Indian Dunes, about 35 miles north of downtown LA. It was a popular location for film and TV shoots, and set designers had repurposed it as a wartime Vietnamese village for a segment of Twilight Zone, the movie. At 2:20 a.m. on July 23rd, a plummeting helicopter had killed 3 people. The actor Vic Morrow and 2 children he had been carrying across the water, while special effects detonated around him. Sergeant Buds arrived soon after. It was not yet dawn. He stepped carefully around the toppled chopper, its big blades sideways in the mud of the Santa Clara River. He examined the charred remains of the mocked-up village. He noticed there were huge scorch marks on the cliff behind the set.
When I got there, a lot of the people on the set had left. I had been informed that it was the final shoot for the film and that there were probably 250 people that had been at the scene. I knew my work was going to be cut out for me with a lot of interviews. The people on the set took me over to the spit of land that the helicopter landed on, and they had picked up some body parts and put them in a garbage bag.
Some of the parts were missing, however, and he ordered that the river be drained.
It smelled like gasoline. It was permeated with the smell of gasoline. And right at the beginning there, it didn't seem like anything nefarious. Initially, it looked like this was another industrial accident type situation.
Buds got a list of the people who'd been on set and began educating himself in the language of film production. He learned what a best boy does and what a script supervisor does. He needed to know who was responsible for what. He learned that at 11:30 p.m. on the 22nd, in a nearly identical precursor to the fatal flight, a fireball had singed the face of a production manager riding in the helicopter.
You know, that didn't seem right from the start.
Buds thought it should have been an indication that the explosions were too big. It should have put them on notice.
The 11:30 shot, had that not happened, I wouldn't have probably considered manslaughter charges at all. I would have figured it would have been a civil suit. So I had I put together a murder book, we call it.
Buds carried the book into the district attorney's office to face a room full of prosecutors to make his case for manslaughter charges.
They had several of their super DAs that handle long-term type prosecutions to evaluate what I was going to tell them. So anyway, I concentrated really on the 11:30 shot, all the danger that it proposed, and that there had been no mitigating meeting before they went to the final shot, and that in the final shot, they added explosives, bigger explosives, and brought the helicopter in lower than it had been at the 11:30 shot.
The director, John Landis, had insisted on the presence of real children in the scene, rather than dummies. Even though he knew the presence of kids at that hour violated labor laws, he wanted actual kids in the arms of a real actor as the helicopter hovered overhead and explosions went off around them.
It was just unconscionable that they would go forward with that for cinema verite. It's just, there were a lot of different ways that it could have been shot, but they chose to go with reality, and the reality struck.
Today on Crimes of the Times, the story of how a fatal on-set accident turned into a criminal case that changed filmmaking, and of the detective who made the case happen. I'm Christopher Goffard. The actor Vic Morrow, one of the 3 victims in the Twilight Zone set disaster, had performed as a surly delinquent in Blackboard Jungle, a tough soldier in the TV drama Combat, and a volatile baseball coach in The Bad News Bears. In July 1982, the 53-year-old actor was playing a bigot dreamed up by writer-director John Landis for a segment of Twilight Zone the movie. Landis, 31 years old, was an A-list talent. He had a reputation as a gleeful impresario of envelope-pushing stunts. Sheriff's Detective Thomas Buds asked questions of the people around Landis. He developed the impression of a director who believed himself in competition for spectacular spectacle with Steven Spielberg, who was co-producing the Twilight Zone movie but would not be implicated in the case.
It became real apparent that there was this big deal going on in Hollywood at the time to see who was going to be the heir apparent to Steven Spielberg.
Landis liked to brag about all the cars he had demolished filming the Blues Brothers a few years earlier.
Talking to the people on the set, I don't know how all directors direct, but he was tyrannical, is the words they were using. It's not my words, it's their descriptions. He wanted things done certain ways, and if you couldn't do it, he would find somebody else to do it.
For the climactic scene of his Twilight Zone segment, Landis had dropped Morrow's character into the Vietnam War to enact what was intended as a redemption scene. He was supposed to be a hero, rescuing 2 children from a village as it erupted in flames. He was supposed to say, "I'll keep you safe, kids." And so in the last seconds of his life, Morrow was struggling through knee-deep water with a child in each arm. The children were 7-year-old Micah Din Lee and 6-year-old Renee Chen. They had never acted before. Their parents were receiving a few $100s for their work. They had been dazzled by Spielberg's blockbuster E.T., which had just come out.
Well, it was kind of heart-wrenching. They saw the movie E.T., and they thought it's all imaginary. It's Hollywood, it's imaginary. Of course they want their kids put in there. They had no idea, obviously, how the Hollywood industry works. It was like E.T., it's all just magical, and they were very happy and excited.
About 24 feet above Morrow and the children hovered 3 tons of noisy metal, a combat-style Huey UH-1B helicopter. As a special effects man fired gasoline and sawdust mortars skyward, Morrow stumbled in the water, righted himself, and slogged on. The effects man was not looking up when he shot off the fireball that engulfed the tail rotor, sending the helicopter into an uncontrollable spin.
And then standing on the embankment, the helicopter's coming down and kills their children right in front of them. They said, they were screaming, "This isn't supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be like this."
The falling helicopter crushed and killed Renee, while the 44-foot main rotor blade decapitated Morrow and Micah. In the footage shown over and over on TV, a curtain of water mercifully blocked the fatal split second from the camera's view. John Landis had been standing nearby in waiters when it happened. He appeared at Morrow's funeral. He struggled to speak. He spoke of art. The director said, quote, "Tragedy strikes in an instant, but film is immortal. Perhaps we can take some solace in the knowledge that through his work and stage, television and film, Vic lives forever." One of Vic Morrow's friends, Rick Jason, gave a reporter his opinion of the disaster, quote, "It's just an outlandish freak, and I don't think you can draw a conclusion from it." But Sergeant Buds, who was the only detective on the case, was drawing a firm conclusion as he conducted hundreds of interviews in the months that followed. He spoke to camera operators and assistants, makeup artists and hairstylists, and in Bud's mind, a picture formed of an arrogant, overbearing director who was cavalier about risk and whose subordinates were fearful of second-guessing him. Buds told me that the account of cameraman Steve Lydecker was pivotal in his decision to recommend charges. Lydecker said Landis ignored his warning about the dangers of the special effects. "We may lose the helicopter," the cameraman recalled Landis joking.
I knew there were typically a black powder explosive device, sawdust permeated with 10 to 15 gallons of gasoline in these pots. And they were wired to a board that the technician would touch, and it would ignite the black powder, and the soaked sawdust would go up, and it would make a spectacular fireball.
And Buds thought there were other signs of recklessness during the filming. At 9:30 the night before the crash, the two children had been placed in a hut, unaccompanied, near big drums of gasoline. Buds told me that it would have only taken a spark to ignite the gasoline and kill the kids. When he brought the case to the LA County District Attorney's office, prosecutors started firing questions at him, assessing the strengths of the case, probing for weaknesses. He got the feeling they did not want to pursue the case.
Yeah, I got kind of frustrated because it was, you have to understand, I've been working this case alone now for a couple of months, and I've been dealing with the parents, and I try not to get too emotionally involved, but you got two dead kids and a famous movie actor. Maybe you want to take a closer look at this. Finally, I just said, this has gone on now for about a half an hour. I've done several grand juries with you guys. If you don't want to file this thing, because that's the feeling I'm getting, let's just take it to the grand jury. You're off the hook. Let them indict them, and then we'll take it right to trial. And they said, yes, that was it. So I was pretty confident that in trial we were going to be doing pretty good.
Starting a business is incredibly hard and intimidating. Long hours, few or sometimes no coworkers to help, and more than anything, lots and lots of different hats to wear. But once I incorporated Shopify into my business, it was a real game changer. I wish I had started earlier. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/crimesofthetimes. Go to shopify.com/crimesofthetimes. Shopify.com/crimesofthetimes.
Between the fatal crash in summer 1982 and the beginning of his trial in summer 1986, John Landis remained an in-demand artist. He directed the hit screwball comedy Trading Places and Michael Jackson's comic horror thriller video. Twilight Zone the movie came out with the helicopter scene omitted. Then Landis took his seat in a downtown LA courtroom as the first Hollywood director to face criminal charges for a death on set. The possible penalty was 6 years in prison. He faced charges of involuntary manslaughter along with 4 others: his production manager, his associate producer, his special effects coordinator, and the helicopter pilot. The prosecutor, the fiery and theatrical Lea D'Agostino, called Landis, quote, a tyrannical dictator. She said he had ignored common sense and sacrificed safety in service of, quote, a lousy motion picture. There was a 7-man team of aggressive defense attorneys. Among them was James Neal, who had prosecuted the Watergate co-conspirators and Jimmy Hoffa. He told the Twilight Zone jurors, quote, not one of these gentlemen intended to hurt anyone. Not one of these gentlemen thought the scene, as planned and rehearsed, was dangerous. Not one of these gentlemen is guilty of criminal negligence. He called the crash unforeseen and unforeseeable. If the helicopter had crashed a few feet away, he pointed out, Landis himself would be dead. He and other defense attorneys directed blame to the effects man, James Camomile, who had been given immunity for his testimony and admitted that he had not looked up when he shot off the fatal fireball. Celebrities occasionally visited the courtroom, including Dan Aykroyd, a Blues Brothers and Trading Places star. The most wrenching words came from the parents of the dead children, who said they had been misled about the danger. The prosecutor asked Mark Chen, who had lost his only child, whether Landis or anyone else had informed him that his daughter Renee would be filmed with explosives in close proximity, or with a helicopter 24 feet overhead. No, he replied. He said he had agreed to let Renee do the picture so that, quote, she would have a lot of memories when she grew up. Michael Lee's father, Daniel Lee, who had been on the Indian Dunes set, said he heard someone ordering the helicopter to descend as the special effects went off. Lower, lower. Having lived through the Vietnam War as a child, he said he was so startled by the onset explosions that he dropped to the ground. Buds told me he was dismayed to see the jury's reaction to the testimony of one of the parents.
The little petite Chinese woman dressed in a little white dress is taking the stand because her daughter had been killed right in front of her. The jurors didn't seem to be paying attention. They were looking out in the audience at all the celebrities coming in. I just thought, this is really something. And I had just lost my own son, three and a half, drowned. And I just couldn't understand that these people had showed no sympathy to this woman. I was sitting there with my own broken heart. When the mom took the stand, I was just trying to get justice for those children. I figured Vic Morrow, he had made a choice as an adult, but those kids and their parents didn't know what it was all about. And that was a grand shame.
Jurors piled into a bus for a trip to the crash site and to the Academy Theater in Beverly Hills, where they watched the crash from 6 angles. One reporter called it a glamorous setting for a grim task. When defense attorneys presented their case, co-defendant Dorsey Wingo, who had piloted the down chopper, stunned the courtroom when he seemed to suggest that Morrow bore some responsibility for the tragedy. 5 seconds had elapsed between the helicopter's loss of control and the crash. Wingo testified, quote, "It distresses me to the max that he never looked up." The prosecutor derided his remarks as blaming the dead man. Landis took the stand in his own defense and quickly conceded that he had flouted the rules in hiring the children. He said, quote, "We decided to break the law. We decided wrongly to violate the labor code." Landis called it a technical violation. The director denied joking to the cameraman that they might lose the helicopter. He denied that the parents were in the dark about the nature of the scene. He had told them personally, he said. He denied ever being warned that the filming of the fatal scene was dangerous. He denied any recollection of having ordered the helicopter to go lower, lower. At times, the director appeared to choke up. The prosecutor mocked him, saying, "Would you like some Kleenex, sir?" Later, talking to reporters, she called Landis's testimony a calculated performance worthy of an Oscar. She said, quote, "The whole world is lying, according to John Landis, except John Landis. I find that somewhat incredible, and I'm assuming that the jurors will too." She was badly mistaken about the jurors. After 10 months of trial and 9 days of deliberations, all 5 defendants were acquitted. On May 29, 1987, the jury forewoman echoed the defense's main point, saying, quote, "You don't prosecute people for unforeseeable accidents." Thomas Buds, who is now in his late 70s and living in Tennessee, thinks the jury was dazzled by the celebrities who swarmed around Landis.
I was very, very disappointed in the acquittals. We felt we had a really ironclad case.
John Landis would not talk to me for this story. He told a reporter afterward that the prosecutor was, quote, "grotesque," and her case completely dishonest. He said, "I feel that accident very strongly," adding that he was grateful for the jurors' wisdom. He compared the outcome to a Frank Capra movie. A year after his acquittal, jurors received invitations, along with their families, to a special preview of Landis's new movie, the Eddie Murphy comedy Coming to America. Harland Braun, the acerbic attorney who represented one of the director's co-defendants at trial, did not like how it looked. "I wonder if he invited the parents of the children, because they were part of the case too," he said. In the aftermath of the deaths, the Directors Guild of America reprimanded Landis and tightened safety procedures.
If you have a case that's non-intentional harm, it's always an uphill battle to prove criminal responsibility.
This is Stephen Farber, co-author with Mark Green of Outrageous Conduct, Art, Ego, and the Twilight Zone case. He told me a number of filmmakers signed a public letter in support of Landis, challenging the idea that directors were responsible for accidents on their sets.
I think the main point of it was that the film directors were dependent on the advice of so-called experts, special effects coordinators and so forth, so that it wasn't really their decision if the special effects person or the helicopter pilot told the director that this was safe to do, that the director didn't have the expertise to overrule them. But that was, to me, kind of an irrelevant issue, because if you have a very forceful, overbearing director like John Landis, how many technical crew people are going to challenge that person and try to overrule them?
Farber's book argues that whatever the legal outcome, Landis bore moral responsibility for the tragedy. Farber interviewed a number of filmmakers who were highly critical of Landis.
Brian De Palma, very outspoken critic of Landis, and he had done elaborate stunts, with helicopters and explosions, and he pulled no punches. He just felt that what Landis did was way out of line.
Another big-name director to denounce Landis's behavior was William Friedkin, who made The French Connection and The Exorcist. Farber read to me a section from his book recounting his interview with him.
Quote, "If you take the credit a John Doe film, you're saying to the world, I am responsible for everything that you see, for everything that went on in front of the camera and behind the camera. I think that John Landis was responsible, and I think I would have been responsible if, God forbid, that had happened to me. That doesn't mean it was a criminal act." Then he goes on, "I would never have attempted a shot with 2 children and a helicopter flying that low. I would have used dummies for the shot, and if I wanted close-ups of the children, I would shoot them later with a wind machine simulating the wind from the helicopter."
The length of the trial ensured that the terrible footage was constantly on the nightly news. It replayed endlessly. Morrow struggling through the water with a child under each arm, stumbling, righting himself, carrying them to the spot where they would all die behind the curtain of water. At Universal Studios, where Landis was sometimes spotted walking to his office in the 1990s, tram guides were forbidden from mentioning his name. In the decades after the trial, when Landis gave interviews, he spoke in a booming, jovial voice and conveyed the impression of a man whose outsized self-confidence remained undimmed.
When you were watching the trial, did you get a sense of John Landis' suffering? Was he a man in torment, or was he a man who was able to compartmentalize all this?
We talked a lot during the trial, and he was very jovial a lot of the time. And I can't really speculate on his psychology, but I think there are people who just have the ability to put any bad things out of mind and just focus on the positive.
In the end, the case forced Hollywood to tighten security protocols on set. But did Landis escape accountability? Farber thinks the case ultimately hurt Landis' viability as a big-time director. It made him easier not to hire when he stopped creating hits. And his reputation followed him everywhere. Drew McWeeny, a screenwriter, told me that he once saw a local Teamster reading Farber's book in conspicuous view of Landis during a TV shoot in Vancouver. For a lot of crew workers, the director had become a symbol of all the filmmakers who had ordered them to do things on set they knew they weren't supposed to do. McWeeny told me that Landis became frustrated and began yelling at the Teamster with the book. The Teamster did not flinch. Instead, he asked, "Can you sign it?" From LA Times Studios, this is Crimes of the Times. To read more about these cases, check out Crimes of the Times at latimes.com. We also have a link to our video episodes in the show notes.